Captain had seen many strange things in her 20 years of space travel. She had watched the rings of Saturn catch the sunlight like a billion diamonds. She had stood on the red soil of Mars and felt the thin wind against her helmet. She had guided her ship through asteroid fields where one wrong move meant death. But nothing had prepared her for this. The HFY Meridian had been on a simple survey mission. They were mapping a region of space about 40 light-years from Earth when their instruments detected something unusual. A strange energy reading, a ripple in the fabric of space itself. "Captain, I'm reading some kind of anomaly ahead," said Lieutenant from his station. "It looks like, I don't know what it looks like." Walked over to his console and studied the readings. The numbers made no sense. There was a point in space that seemed to fold in on itself. Energy poured from it like water from a broken pipe. "Is it dangerous?" she asked. "Unknown, but it's definitely not natural." Thought for a moment. They had strict protocols for situations like this. They should mark the location, report back to Earth, and let someone else investigate. That was the safe choice, the smart choice. But had not become a captain by always making the safe choice. "Take us closer," she said, slowly. The meridian moved forward. The anomaly grew larger on their screens. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. Colors that had no names swirled around a central point of absolute darkness. The ship began to shake. "Captain, the anomaly is pulling us in," said, his voice rising with fear. "I'm losing control." Full reverse thrust. The engine screamed, the ship groaned, but it was no use. The anomaly had them in its grip. In the span of 3 heartbeats, the HFY Meridian was swallowed whole. Expected death. She expected her ship to be crushed, torn apart, scattered across the void. Instead, there was a moment of perfect silence, a moment where time itself seemed to stop, and then they were somewhere else. The first thing noticed was the stars. They were wrong. The familiar patterns she had memorized as a child were gone. In their place were strange arrangements she had never seen before. The second thing she noticed was the ships. They were everywhere, hundreds of them, thousands, ships of every size and shape moving through space in organized patterns. Some were small, no bigger than the meridian. Others were massive, the size of cities, casting shadows across the void. "Where are we?" someone whispered behind her. Had no answer. She could only stare at the impossible scene before her. Captain shouted, "We're being scanned. Multiple signals, I'm counting at least 50 different sources." "Shields up, charge weapons." "Our weapons are charged, but Captain, those ships out there, some of them are bigger than our moon. I don't think our weapons would even scratch them." Knew he was right, but she would not die without a fight. She would not let her crew die without trying. "Then we go down fighting," she said quietly. "That's what humans do." They waited. The seconds stretched into minutes. His hand hovered over the fire control. Her crew stood ready at their stations, their faces pale but determined. And then something unexpected happened. A message appeared on their communication screen. It was not a threat. It was not a demand for surrender. It was a form. "Registration required for all vessels entering conquered administered space," read aloud, confusion clear in his voice. "Please provide species designation, point of origin, and reason for visit. Estimated processing time, 4 to 6 standard cycles." The bridge was silent. It's a form," said. "They want us to fill out a form." Stared at the screen. They had traveled through some kind of wormhole. They had emerged in what was clearly alien territory, surrounded by ships that could destroy them without effort, and the response was paperwork. She was not sure if she should laugh or cry. "Fill it out," she said finally. "Tell them we're humans from Earth. Tell them we came here by accident, and tell them we would very much like to go home." Typed the response and sent it. Another minute passed, then another form appeared. "Species human not found in registry. Please hold for manual classification." You have been assigned temporary designation, species 4417C, pending classification. A representative will contact you within 900 standard cycles. How long is a standard cycle? Asked. Did some calculations. Based on the time stamps in their messages, a standard cycle is about 2.5 Earth years, so 900 cycles would be about 2,000 years. Finished. They want us to wait 2,000 years. Before anyone could respond, a new signal came through. This time it was a voice. The translation was rough, clearly done by some kind of automatic system, but the words were understandable. Vessel of species 4417C, you have entered conquered space through an unregistered transit point. This is not a common occurrence but is not forbidden. You are required to register your species and point of origin with the administrative corps. Do you understand? Took a deep breath. This is Captain of the Earth Survey Vessel Meridian. We understand. We would like to establish diplomatic relations with your conquered. There was a pause. When the voice returned, it sounded almost amused. Diplomatic relations require full species membership. Your species is currently pending classification. The estimated wait time for classification processing is 840 standard cycles. Once classified, your species may apply for provisional membership. Estimated wait time for provisional membership approval is 150 standard cycles. After provisional membership is granted, you may apply for full membership, which has an estimated approval time of 300 standard cycles. Do you wish to begin this process? Did the math in her head. Even with the reduced numbers, they were talking about nearly 1,000 years. Is there any way to speed up this process? Negative. The Galactic Conquered has processed over 4,000 species in the last 12,000 years. All species follow the same procedure. There are no exceptions. 12,000 years, whispered. Their civilization is 12,000 years old. Held up her hand for silence. We have traveled a long way to get here. We did not know about your conquered. Is there any way we can learn more about your civilization? Perhaps speak with a representative in person. Another pause, longer this time. Your request is unusual but not forbidden. A representative from the administrative corps can meet with you at Station 47, located at the coordinates we are now sending. Be aware that Station 47 is primarily for cargo processing and customs inspection. It is not a diplomatic facility. However, it is the nearest station to your current location. How far? By your vessel's estimated capabilities, approximately 3 weeks of travel. Looked at her crew. They had come this far, they might as well see it through. We accept. Thank you for your assistance. You are welcome. Please note that all visitors to conquered space are required to obey conquered law. A summary of relevant regulations has been uploaded to your vessel's communication system. Failure to obey these regulations may result in fines, detention, or destruction of your vessel. Have a pleasant journey. The connection ended. For a long moment, no one spoke. They had just made first contact with alien life. They had discovered that the galaxy was full of civilizations, thousands of them, organized into some kind of massive government, and that government had treated them like a minor inconvenience. Well, said finally, let's not keep them waiting. The journey to Station 47 took 18 days. During that time, the crew of the Meridian studied the information packet they had been sent. What they learned was both amazing and humbling. The Galactic Conquered was an organization of over 3 million star systems. It had been founded 12,000 years ago by 12 species who had grown tired of war and decided to work together instead. Since then, thousands more species had joined, creating the largest civilization in the known universe. The Conquered had rules for everything: how to travel through space, how to conduct trade, how to resolve disputes, how to handle primitive species who accidentally wandered into their territory. Everything was organized, categorized, and filed away in vast databases that stretched across light years. And humanity was just the latest entry in a very long list. "Look at this," said one evening, showing a map. "This is conquered space, and this tiny dot way out here, that's where Earth is. We're not even in their territory. We're in what they call developmental zones, areas that are too far away to bother with." "So we're the middle of nowhere," said. "Worse than that. We're so far in the middle of nowhere that they didn't even know we existed. The wormhole we came through, it's listed as unstable and non-functional. No one has used it in over 2,000 years." Studied the map. Earth was separated from the nearest conquered trade route by 3,000 light years. To a civilization that could cross the galaxy, that might not seem like much. But to humanity, who had only been traveling between stars for a century, it was an impossible distance. "We're not just primitive to them," she realized. "We're irrelevant." Station 47 was not impressive. It was a boxy structure floating in empty space, covered in cargo containers and docking ports. Ships came and went constantly, loading and unloading goods. No one paid any attention to the meridian as it approached. They were met at the docking port by a single alien. It was tall and thin, with blue-gray skin and 4 arms that ended in delicate fingers. Its eyes were large and dark, showing no emotion. "I am administrator of the administrative corps," it said through a translation device worn around its neck. "I have been assigned to process your arrival. Please follow me." Had expected many things from her first face-to-face meeting with an alien. She had expected wonder, suspicion, perhaps fear. What she had not expected was boredom. Led them through the station with all the enthusiasm of someone doing a job they had done 1,000 times before. It asked them questions about their planet, their species, their technology. It took samples of their DNA. It scanned their ship. And through it all, it showed not the slightest curiosity about who they were or where they came from. "Your species is being classified as pre-industrial type 4, said finally. "This is a provisional classification based on your technological development." "Pre-industrial," said. "We have faster-than-light travel. We've colonized other planets." "Your faster-than-light technology is based on skip drive principles. The Conquered abandoned skip drive research 8,000 years ago due to safety concerns. Your colony world's number 3. The average Conquered member species controls between 50 and 200 systems. By Conquered standards, you are pre-industrial type 4. Wanted to argue, but what was the point? To this civilization, humanity was a child who had just learned to walk. The fact that they had learned to walk on their own, without any help, meant nothing. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you return to your territory and continue your development. In 840 standard cycles, your species will be eligible for classification review. If you have made sufficient progress, you may be upgraded to industrial type 1. From there, the path to membership is clear, though lengthy. Do you have any questions?" Had 1,000 questions. She wanted to know about their technology, their history, their culture. She wanted to know if there were others like humanity out there, struggling to find their place in a galaxy that didn't care. But looking at its empty eyes, she knew she would get no answers. Not real ones. To this administrator, humanity was just another file to be processed, another form to be filled. "No," she said quietly, "no questions." The journey home took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of silence as the crew processed what they had learned. 3 weeks of looking at the stars and knowing that somewhere out there, a vast civilization went about its business without giving humanity a second thought. When they emerged from the wormhole into familiar space, felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. They were home, but home felt smaller now, less important. "Captain said, Earth is requesting our report. They want to know what we found." Thought about what she would tell them. "We found intelligent life. We found a galactic civilization. We found that the universe is full of wonders beyond our imagination. And none of it cares that we exist. Tell them we're coming home, she said. Tell them to prepare for a full briefing. And tell them, she paused, looking out at the stars. Tell them we have a lot of work to do. The news of the Meridian's discovery spread across Earth like wildfire. For a brief moment, humanity united in wonder. They were not alone. The universe was full of life, full of civilizations, full of possibilities. But wonder slowly turned to something else, something harder, something colder. Because the message from the stars was clear. Humanity was small. Humanity was primitive. Humanity was barely worth noticing. And that, more than anything, made humanity angry. In the halls of power, decisions were made. Resources were allocated. Plans were drawn. If the galaxy would not come to humanity, humanity would go to the galaxy. If the conquered would not respect them, humanity would earn that respect. It might take decades. It might take centuries. But humanity had never been good at giving up. Stood before the United Nations, her uniform crisp, her voice steady. She told them what she had seen. She told them what she had learned. And she told them what she believed. They see us as primitive, she said. They see us as irrelevant. They put us in a file and forgot about us. But that is their mistake, because we have something they have forgotten. We have hunger. We have drive. We have the will to prove ourselves against any odds. She looked out at the assembled leaders of humanity. They gave us a waiting time of nearly 1,000 years. They expect us to sit quietly and wait our turn. But I say we do not wait. I say we build. I say we grow. I say we become something that cannot be ignored. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was quiet but fierce. The galaxy does not know us yet, but they will. One day they will look at humanity and they will wonder how they ever overlooked us. And when that day comes, we will be ready. The applause began slowly, then built to a roar. It was the sound of a species that had been told it was nothing and had decided to become something. It was the sound of humanity waking up. Far away in the endless files of the administrative core, a document sat untouched. Species 4417C humans. Point of origin, Earth. Classification, pre-industrial type 4. Status, pending. The file gathered dust. But on a small blue planet in a forgotten corner of the galaxy, something was beginning. Something that would one day shake the foundations of the conquered itself. The humans were building. And they had learned to be patient. 15 years had passed since the Meridians returned to Earth. 15 years of building. 15 years of planning. 15 years of waiting for the galaxy to notice. The galaxy did not notice. On the conquered side of the wormhole, humanity had established a small station. They called it Threshold. It was not much to look at, just a collection of modules bolted together, floating in empty space. But it was theirs. Their first foothold in a galaxy that did not want them. Ambassador David had lived on Threshold for 3 years now. He was a tall man with tired eyes and patient hands. Before the discovery, he had been a diplomat on Earth, solving problems between nations. Now he solved problems between species, or at least he tried to. The problem was that no one wanted to talk to him. Application for Accelerated Classification Review, David read aloud from his terminal. Reason: insufficient documentation. Please resubmit with forms 447C through 447K, notarized by a registered conquered official. He had submitted those forms 3 times already. Each time they found a new reason to reject them. Missing signatures, wrong format, improper filing order. It was always something. David leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. He had known this would be hard. He had known the conquered would not welcome humanity with open arms, but he had not expected to be ignored so completely. In 3 years, he had managed exactly 1 meeting with a conquered official. It had lasted 20 minutes. The official had spent most of that time explaining why humanity's requests were impossible, impractical, or simply not worth considering. "You must understand," the official had said, "the Concord processes hundreds of species applications every century. We cannot make exceptions. The system exists for a reason." "What reason?" David had asked. "Order, stability, fairness. Every species follows the same path. Every species waits their turn. That is how civilization works." David had wanted to argue. He had wanted to point out that a 1,000-year wait was not fair, that ignoring an entire species was not civilized, but he had held his tongue. Diplomacy was about patience, and David had learned to be very patient. Now, sitting alone in his office, he wondered if patience was enough. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." The door slid open to reveal a young woman in a science officer's uniform. Her name was Dr. Sarah, and she was the head of Threshold's research team. She looked excited, which was unusual. Life on Threshold did not offer many reasons for excitement. "Ambassador, you need to see this," she said. "We've intercepted a Concord communication. It's about us." David sat up. "What kind of communication?" "A classification report. Someone in the Concord bureaucracy has been looking at our data, really looking at it, and they've found some interesting things." She handed him a data pad. David scrolled through the document, his eyes widening as he read. "This can't be right," he said. "These numbers are accurate," Sarah said. "We checked them against our own records. Whoever wrote this report did their homework. And Ambassador," she paused, a strange smile on her face, "I don't think they believe it either." Far across Concord space, in a cramped office on a station that processed millions of documents every day, a named was having a very bad week. Was young by his species standards, barely 200 years old. He had joined the administrative corps with dreams of making a difference, of being part of the great machine that kept the galaxy running. Instead, he had been assigned to the classification division, where his job was to process the files of species too primitive to matter. It was, as his colleagues often reminded him, a dead-end job, the kind of work you gave to someone you wanted to forget about. But had a problem. He could not stop himself from actually doing the work. "Species 4417C, he muttered to himself, staring at his screen. "Humans. Origin, Earth Sol System. Classification, Pre-Industrial Type 4. He had pulled this file by accident looking for something else. It should have been a quick review. Verify the data, stamp the form, move on. That was how the system worked. But something in the numbers had caught his attention. "Reaction time, 0.25 seconds average," he read. "That can't be right." He pulled up the Galactic baseline for comparison. The average reaction time for sapient species was 1.1 seconds. Some predator species could manage 0.8 seconds. The fastest known reaction time belonged to the aggressive species that had been causing trouble on the far borders, at 0.4 seconds. The humans, according to their own data, reacted almost twice as fast as the. "Must be a translation error," said, but he made a note anyway. The next number caught his attention even more. Visual processing speed, 60 frames per second baseline, with trained individuals reaching 240 frames per second. Blinked his large eyes. His own species processed visual information at about 30 frames per second. The Concord average was 25. The idea that a species could naturally see at 60 frames per second was unusual. The idea that they could train themselves to see at 240 was absurd. "Definitely a translation error," he said, but he kept reading. "Gravity adaptation, standard 1G. Frowned, he pulled up Earth's planetary data. Surface gravity, 9.8 meters per second squared. That was. He did the conversion. Just under 1G by Earth standards. but by Concord standards, where 1G was calibrated to the galactic average of 5.2 meters per second squared. There is nearly 2G, realized. They evolved on a world with twice the standard gravity. He began cross-referencing other data. Bone density, 40% above galactic average. Muscle mass, 35% above galactic average. Endurance capacity, off the charts. There was a note in the file about something called persistence hunting, where humans would chase prey animals for hours until the animals literally died from exhaustion. There was another note about something called marathons, where humans ran for 40 kilometers at a time for fun. For fun, repeated to himself. They run until their bodies break down, and they do it for entertainment. He should have stopped there. He should have flagged the file as containing errors and moved on. That was what any sensible administrator would do, but had never been very sensible. Instead, he started digging. Over the next few weeks, requested every piece of information about humans that existed in the Concord database. There was not much. The species was too new and too far away to have generated much attention, but what little existed painted a disturbing picture. Their technology was primitive by Concord standards, yes, but the principles behind it were not. Their skip drives, for example. The Concord had abandoned skip drive research 8,000 years ago because the technology was too unstable. The energy requirements were too high. The risk of catastrophic failure was too great. The humans had not known any of this. They had developed skip drives from scratch, using trial and error and the bodies of dead astronauts who had died in failed experiments. They had brute-forced their way to faster-than-light travel through sheer stubbornness. They should not have been able to do this, muttered, reading the technical reports. The mathematics alone should have taken centuries to develop. They did it in decades. Then there was their history. The humans had sent information about their past as part of their classification application, read about their wars, their plagues, their natural disasters, their extinctions. Earth, it turned out, was not a kind planet. It was a world of volcanoes and earthquakes, of ice ages and meteor strikes, of predators and parasites. By any reasonable standard, the humans should have gone extinct long ago. Instead, they had spread across their planet, adapting to every environment from frozen wastelands to burning deserts. They had survived everything their world threw at them and come out stronger. Whispered, using an old term that had fallen out of favor in the Concord. It referred to planets so hostile that life should not have evolved there at all. The Concord had identified only a handful of such worlds in its 12,000-year history. Earth was not on the list. No one had bothered to check. Compiled his findings into a report. He was careful to present only facts, only data, only numbers. He knew how it would look if he added speculation. He knew how his superiors would react if he suggested that the Concord had made a mistake. But even with just the facts, the report was explosive. It showed that humanity had been massively, that their biological capabilities exceeded most known species, that their technological development, while primitive in form, demonstrated an understanding of principles that should have been beyond them. He submitted the report and waited. The response came 3 days later. It was a single sentence. Report rejected. Data inconsistent with established baselines. Please correct errors and resubmit. Stared at the message. They had not even read it. They had seen numbers that did not match their expectations and assumed he had made mistakes. He could have let it go. He could have corrected the data, smoothing out the anomalies until the humans fit neatly into their assigned category. That was what was expected. That was what any smart administrator would do. Instead, did something very foolish. He started asking questions. He contacted the border station that had first processed the human vessel. He requested sensor logs, biological samples, technical analyses. Most of his requests were ignored. A few were outright. But some got through, passed along by board clerks who did not know or care what he was looking for. The more data he gathered, the more certain he became. The humans were not what they seemed. They were not primitive. They were not harmless. They were something the conquered had never encountered before. A species that had evolved on a world that should have killed them, developing capabilities that should have been impossible, and then reaching for the stars with technology held together by willpower and desperation. And the conquered had filed them away and forgotten about them. His investigation did not go unnoticed. His supervisor called him in for a meeting. "You have been spending a great deal of time on species 4417C, the supervisor said. It was not a question. "Yes, Director. I believe there are significant errors in their classification. Errors that you have been asked to correct." "With respect, Director, I do not believe they are errors. The data is consistent across multiple sources. The humans are. The humans are a primitive species from a backwater region of space that no one cares about," the supervisor interrupted. "They are not worth the resources you have been wasting. They are not worth anyone's attention. Do you understand?" Understood perfectly. He was being told to stop, to forget what he had found, to be a good administrator and process the paperwork and not ask questions. "I understand, Director." "Good, I am reassigning you to the Cargo Documentation Division. You will find it less stimulating." Was demoted and transferred. His report was buried. His requests for additional data were blocked. As far as the conquered was concerned, the matter was closed. But could not let it go. In his new position, he had less access to information, less ability to investigate, but he had time and patience and a growing certainty that he had found something important, something that the conquered needed to know, even if it did not want to hear it. He kept a copy of his original report. He continued to gather data whenever he could. He built connections with clerks and analysts across the bureaucracy, trading favors for information. Slowly, piece by piece, he assembled a picture of a species that everything the conquered believed about how civilizations developed. Years passed, grew older, his career stagnated, his colleagues forgot about him, but he did not give up. Because somewhere in the back of his mind, a thought had taken root, a thought that kept him awake at night, a thought that grew stronger with every piece of data he found. The conquered had made a mistake, a terrible mistake. They had looked at a predator and seen prey. They had looked at warriors and seen children. They had looked at a species forged in the fires of a death world and dismissed them as primitive. And one day, the galaxy would learn just how wrong they had been. On Threshold Station, Ambassador David finished reading the intercepted report. He sat in silence for a long moment, processing what he had learned. "Someone in the conquered actually noticed us," he said finally. "It looks like they shut him down pretty quickly," Doctor said. "But yes, someone noticed." David nodded slowly. It was a small thing. A single analyst, probably working alone, probably punished for asking too many questions. But it was something. A crack in the wall. A sign that the conquered was not as monolithic as it appeared. "Can we find out more about this analyst?" he asked. "The report says, can we make contact?" "It would be risky. If the conquered found out we were intercepting their communications." "I know, but this person saw what we really are. They understood. That makes them valuable." Doctor nodded. "I'll see what I can do." David looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, a lonely bureaucrat was fighting a battle no one else cared about, fighting for the truth about humanity, fighting against a system that did not want to hear it. David smiled. The galaxy might not have noticed humanity yet, but someone had, and that someone was now an ally whether they knew it or not. "Keep building," David said quietly, almost to himself. "Keep growing, keep waiting. One day they'll have to see us. One day they won't be able to look away." He turned back to his work. There were more forms to fill out, more rejections to accept, more patience to exercise. But for the first time in years, David felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. Because somewhere in the vast machinery of the Concord, a single file refused to stay buried. A single analyst refused to stop asking questions, and a single truth refused to be ignored. The humans were not what they seemed. And sooner or later, the galaxy would have to face that fact. Whether it was ready or not. 30 years had passed since the Meridian stumbled through the wormhole. 30 years of quiet growth. 30 years of building ships and training soldiers and waiting for something to happen. The something came from the far side of the galaxy. The dominion of the was everything the Conquered was not. Where the Conquered preached peace, the practiced war. Where the Conquered valued cooperation, the valued conquest. For 1,000 years, they had lurked at the edges of civilized space, picking off weak species and adding them to their empire. The Conquered disapproved, of course. They sent diplomatic protests. They imposed economic sanctions, but they never actually did anything. They were too far away, too dangerous, too much trouble. So the Conquered watched and worried and hoped the problem would solve itself. It did not solve itself, it grew. 12 species had fallen to in the last century alone. Some were absorbed into the dominion. Others were simply erased. They did not see none as people. They saw them as resources to be used or obstacles to be removed. And now they had found a new target. Fleet Commander studied the map of the Orion Spur with hungry eyes. He was old for nearly 300 standard cycles, and he had grown bored with easy conquests. The species near space had learned to fear them. They ran at the first sign of a fleet. There was no sport in chasing prey that had already given up. But this new region was different. The Orion Spur was so far from Conquered protection that it might as well have been in another galaxy. And according to intelligence reports, it was home to a single primitive species that had barely discovered faster-than-light travel. Humans, they called themselves. Species 4417C in the Conquered Registry. Classification, Pre-Industrial Type 4. Showed his teeth in what his species used as a smile. Pre-industrial, that meant simple weapons, weak ships, easy prey. How many worlds do they have? He asked his aide. 5 confirmed colonies, Commander. There, Earth and 4 others. Total population estimated at 12 billion. And their military. Minimal, a few hundred patrol ships, no dedicated warships, no significant orbital defenses. Leaned back in his command chair. This would not be a war. It would be a harvest. He would crush their colonies, enslave their population, and use their resources to fuel the next campaign. The Conquered would send protests as they always did, and they would ignore them as they always did. Prepare the fleet, he ordered. 15 ships should be sufficient. We leave in 3 cycles. The people of New Helsinki had no warning. The colony was humanity's third, established 15 years ago on a cold world that reminded the settlers of their Scandinavian homeland. They had built domed cities to keep out the frigid air. They had carved farms from the frozen soil. They had raised children who had never seen Earth and did not miss it. 2 million people called New Helsinki home. They thought of themselves as pioneers, brave souls carving out a new life in the wilderness of space. They did not think of themselves as targets. The fleet emerged from skip space at 3:42 local time. 15 warships, each one bristling with weapons that could crack a planet. They did not announce themselves. They did not make demands. They simply opened fire on the orbital stations and waited for the screaming to begin. It took exactly 4 minutes for the Colonial Defense Force to respond. Commander was drinking coffee when the alarm started. He was 52 years old, a career military man who had spent most of his service hopping he would never have to fight. Now, staring at his tactical display, he realized that hope had been foolish. All ships, this is Commander. We have hostile contacts in orbit. Unknown configuration but definitely not friendly. All hands to battle stations. He had 12 ships under his command. Patrol vessels mostly, designed for chasing pirates and escorting cargo. They had weapons, but nothing that could threaten a proper warship. Against 15 enemy vessels of unknown capability, they did not stand a chance. His crews knew this, but they went anyway. "Sir," his weapons officer said, "their ships are huge. Our sensors are having trouble tracking them, and their weapons. I've never seen energy signatures like this." "Doesn't matter what they have," said. "What matters is that they're attacking our home. Can you target them?" "Yes, sir, but I don't know if our weapons can hurt them." "Then we'll find out. All ships engage the enemy, make them work for every inch." The Battle of New Helsinki would later be studied in military academies across the galaxy, not because of the tactics, not because of the strategy, but because of what it revealed about the species called humanity. They expected the humans to run. That was what prey did. You showed them your strength and they fled, and you chased them down at your leisure. It was the natural order of things. The humans did not run. Commander's tiny fleet accelerated directly toward the formation. Their ships, barely a tenth the size of the enemy vessels, should have been easy targets. Instead, they moved in ways the computers could not predict. "What are they doing?" demanded, watching the tactical display. They're evading, Commander, but our targeting systems can't lock on. They're moving too fast." "Too fast? They're in small craft. How can they be too fast?" The answer came when the first ship took a hit. A human patrol vessel had somehow gotten inside their defensive perimeter and fired a spread of missiles at point-blank range. The missiles were primitive by standards, barely worth noticing. But they hit critical systems, and suddenly a ship that had crushed a dozen species was bleeding fire into the void. Felt something he had not felt in a very long time: uncertainty. "Focus fire on that vessel," he ordered. "Destroy it." They turned their weapons on the offending patrol ship. It should have been instant death. But the human pilot threw his vessel into a series of maneuvers that the computers flagged as impossible. He pushed his ship to accelerations that should have killed everyone aboard. He twisted and dove and somehow, impossibly, survived for another 30 seconds before a lucky shot finally found him. But in those 30 seconds, 2 more human ships had gotten through. On the bridge of the patrol vessel, Lieutenant watched her display with cold eyes. Yes, the same family. His granddaughter, named in honor of the captain who had first touched alien stars, now fighting to defend her species' future. "This is command. You are ordered to withdraw. Repeat, you are ordered to withdraw." Did not respond. She was too busy flying. Her ship was taking hits. Her crew was dying, but she had found a weakness. The big ships turned slowly. Their weapons could not track targets that moved fast enough. And humans, it turned out, could move very fast indeed. "Engineering, give me everything you've got," she said. "Burn out the engines if you have to. I need speed." "Ma'am, we're already at 110% capacity. The crew can't take much more." "The crew will take what they have to take. We're not dying here, not today." She pushed the throttle forward. They screamed through space, pulling turns that would have crushed any other species. Her crew fought through the pain, their vision going gray at the edges, their bodies pushed to the breaking point. But they kept fighting. Behind her, the retrofitted mining vessel Johannesburg was making its own calculations. Captain had spent 20 years hauling ore through the asteroid belts. He knew his ship better than he knew his own children. The Johannesburg was not a warship. It was not fast. It was not maneuverable. But it was heavy. Very, very heavy. "All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for emergency evacuation." "Sir," his first officer looked at him with confusion. "You heard me. Everyone to the escape pods, now." "What are you going to do?" Looked at the tactical display. One dreadnought had moved away from the formation trying to catch the. It was alone, vulnerable, and directly in his path. "I'm going to solve a problem," he said. "Go, that's an order." The Johannesburg had been designed to move asteroids. Its engines were massive, far more powerful than any warship its size. When pushed them to full power and aimed his ship at the dreadnought, he was moving at 0.3 times the speed of light. They saw him coming. They tried to evade, but their ship was too big, too slow. All they could do was watch as the Johannesburg crossed the final distance between them. The impact was visible from the planet's surface. A flash of light brighter than any star, followed by a shockwave of debris that stretched across thousands of kilometers. The Johannesburg and the dreadnought ceased to exist in the same instant, their matter mixing and dispersing into the void. Captain had become the first human to destroy a warship of a major galactic power. He would not be the last. Fleet Commander watched the destruction of his ship with something approaching disbelief. A mining vessel, a primitive, converted mining vessel, had destroyed one of his dreadnoughts. The humans had lost their ship too, but they had won the exchange. One obsolete freighter for one of the most advanced warships in the Dominion. "Commander," his aide said, voice shaking, "we've lost contact with the Vengeance, and the Ironclad is reporting heavy damage. We're taking casualties, Commander." Casualties? From a species classified as pre-industrial, from prey that should have rolled over and died. "Order the fleet to regroup," said. "Concentrate fire, destroy them all." But the humans would not hold still. They darted and weaved through the formation, always moving, always attacking. Their ships were dying, yes, but each one took a piece of the enemy with it. Each one made the pay in blood. And then something happened that had never experienced in 300 years of warfare. His crews started to panic. "Commander, the humans, they're not stopping. We've hit them dozens of times and they keep coming." "That's impossible. Biological organisms cannot sustain that kind of damage." "We have visual confirmation. One of their Marines was hit by plasma fire, direct hit to the torso. He remained standing for 11 seconds, continuing to fire his weapon. 11 seconds, Commander, with a hole in his chest." Felt cold. These were not civilized beings. These were not prey. These were something else entirely, something they had never encountered. "Monsters. Order the retreat," he said. "Sir." "You heard me, full retreat. All ships withdraw immediately." Of the 15 ships that had entered the new Helsinki system, 3 made it out. 3 battered, burning vessels, fleeing from a species they had expected to enslave. Final transmission was intercepted by conquered monitoring stations. It would be passed from hand to hand, discussed in hushed tones, until it reached the ears of those who needed to hear it. "They are not primitives," said. "They are something else. We came to hunt and we found wolves. Do not wake them. Do not provoke them. Leave them alone in their territory and pray they never come for ours." The Battle of New Helsinki cost humanity dearly. 8 ships destroyed, over 200 dead, one colony that would need years to recover. But they had won. News of the victory spread across human space like wildfire. The people who had been told they were nothing, that they were primitive, that they did not matter, had faced a major galactic power and sent it running. On Earth, celebrations erupted in the streets. People who had never met a soldier hugged strangers and wept with joy. They had been told the galaxy did not care about them. Now the galaxy would have to pay attention. On Threshold Station, Ambassador David received a report on the battle. He read it in silence, his face showing no emotion. When he finished, he set down the data pad and looked out at the stars. "They came for us," he said quietly. "They came to destroy us and we beat them." Doctor nodded. "The Conquered is requesting information about the engagement. They want to know how we did it." "What did you tell them?" "Nothing yet. I wanted to ask you first." David thought for a long moment. The Conquered had ignored humanity for 30 years. They had filed them away as irrelevant. Now suddenly they were interested. Now suddenly they wanted to talk. "Tell them," David said finally, "that if they want information about humanity's military capabilities, they can submit a formal request through proper channels. Estimated processing time, 840 standard cycles." Smiled, "You're enjoying this." "A little," David admitted. "We waited 30 years for them to notice us. They can wait a few decades for answers." But even as he spoke, David knew this was not the end. They had been beaten, yes, but they had also been humiliated. Species like that did not forget humiliation. They did not forgive defeat. They would be back, and next time they would not underestimate humanity. Next time they would bring everything they had. David turned back to his work. There were messages to send, allies to cultivate, preparations to make. The galaxy had finally noticed humanity. Now humanity had to be ready for what came next. Far away in his cramped office in the Cargo Documentation Division, received a copy of Fleet Commander transmission. He read it 3 times, his heart's beating faster with each repetition. They are not primitives, they are something else. Allowed himself a small smile. For decades, he had been telling anyone who would listen that the humans were not what they seemed. For decades, he had been ignored. But now there was proof. Now there was evidence that could not be dismissed as translation errors or bureaucratic mistakes. Now the galaxy would have to face the truth. He pulled up his old report, the one that had been rejected all those years ago. He read it through, checking every number, every fact, every conclusion. Then he began to write a new version, updated with everything he had learned since. This time he would not be ignored. This time the conquered would have to listen. Because the humans had proven something that the galaxy had forgotten. They had proven that being civilized did not mean being weak. They had proven that patience was not the same as surrender. They had proven that the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones everyone dismissed, could be the most dangerous of all. The wolves had shown their teeth. And the galaxy would never look at them the same way again. 45 years had passed since first contact. 45 years since Captain had looked upon alien stars and realized humanity was not alone. In that time, everything had changed. And nothing had changed. The conquered still classified humanity as pre-industrial Type 4. The bureaucracy still processed their applications with glacial slowness. The galaxy still saw them as a curiosity, a strange little species that had somehow survived a minor skirmish with the victory at New Helsinki had generated some attention. A few news programs had covered the story. Some academics had written papers about the surprising resilience of certain primitive species, but the interest faded quickly. The galaxy had bigger concerns. The humans were, after all, still nobody. This was, Ambassador David reflected, exactly how humanity wanted it. In the 15 years since the battle, humanity had been busy. Ship production had quadrupled. New weapons systems had been developed and tested. Training programs had turned ordinary citizens into soldiers capable of feats that would have seemed like magic to their ancestors. And all of it had happened quietly, in the forgotten corner of space that no one bothered to watch. David stood on the observation deck of Threshold Station, which had grown from a small outpost into a proper facility, though still modest by conquered standards. He was 68 years old now, his hair gray, his face lined with the marks of decades spent fighting a bureaucracy that did not want to admit he existed. But he was still fighting. "Ambassador," his aide said, approaching with a data pad, "we've received word from Earth Command they are coming." David did not turn from the window. How many? 200 ships, their entire battle fleet. They've been gathering at the border for months. So finally convinced them. It appears so. Intel suggests he's been lobbying the Dominion Council ever since New Helsinki. He told them that humanity is a threat that needs to be eliminated before we become too powerful. David allowed himself a thin smile, and they believed him. They didn't at first, but he kept pushing, showed them the combat footage, showed them the casualty reports. Eventually, they decided it was better to be safe than sorry. The aide hesitated. Ambassador, 200 ships. That's more firepower than any species has ever faced from the. Our fleet is strong now, but we're outnumbered, David finished. I know, Earth Command knows. That's why we've been preparing for this moment for 15 years. He finally turned from the window. His eyes were calm, steady, the eyes of a man who had learned to play a very long game. Contact the conquered monitoring stations. Tell them that the Dominion is about to launch an unprovoked attack on human territory. Tell them, we believe this action violates at least 7 conquered treaties. And tell them we would appreciate any assistance they can provide. Sir, the conquered won't help us. They never have. I know, but I want the request on record. I want them to have to say no. I want everyone to see that we asked for help and were. The aide nodded slowly, understanding. You want witnesses. The galaxy is about to see what humanity can really do. I want them watching from the very beginning. On the command ship Eternal Conquest, Fleet Commander stood before his assembled officers and smiled. 15 years ago, I made a mistake. I underestimated the humans. I sent a raiding party when I should have sent an army. Today, we correct that mistake. He gestured to the massive display behind him. 200 ships, the largest fleet ever assembled, arranged in perfect formation. Against them, intelligence suggested the humans had perhaps 800 vessels, though most were small patrol craft and converted civilian ships. The humans are fierce, continued. I will not deny that. They fight with a savagery I have rarely seen, but they are still few and we are many. They cannot match our numbers. They cannot match our firepower. They cannot match the might of the Dominion. He raised his fist. Today we wipe them from the galaxy. Today we prove that the bow to no one. Today we hunt. The fleet roared its approval. The Sol system had been humanity's home for 4 billion years. It had watched over the first single-celled organisms, the dinosaurs, the rise and fall of civilizations, and finally the species that would reach for the stars. Now it was about to witness something unprecedented. The defense of Earth. Admiral commanded the human fleet from the bridge of the UES Defiance, the largest warship humanity had ever built. Even so, it was dwarfed by the dreadnoughts now entering the system. 200 enemy ships, 800 defenders. On paper it should have been enough, but had seen the intelligence reports. He knew what those ships could do. He knew that on any fair battlefield humanity would lose. So humanity had decided not to fight fair. All units, this is Admiral. The enemy has entered the Sol system. They expect to find a primitive species defending there with desperate courage. Let's show them something different. Let's show them what 45 years of preparation looks like. Execute operation. They expected the humans to form a defensive line around Earth. That was the logical approach. That was what any sensible species would do when facing superior numbers. Instead, the human fleet scattered. 800 ships split into dozens of smaller groups, each one disappearing into the asteroid belts, the gas giant rings, the countless hiding places that the Sol system offered. Within minutes, the neat formation of the human fleet had become chaos. What are they doing? Demanded. Are they running? Unknown, Commander. Their communications are encrypted. We cannot determine their intentions. It doesn't matter. If they scatter, we destroy them piecemeal. All ships pursue and engage, no mercy. The fleet broke formation, hunting. They had expected a battle. Instead, they found a nightmare. Humanity had spent 45 years learning the Sol system. They knew every asteroid, every moon, every dust cloud and radiation belt, and they had seeded the system with surprises. The first ship to die never saw what killed it. A cluster of asteroids it was passing suddenly revealed themselves to be weapons platforms, opening fire at point-blank range. The ship's shields held for perhaps 3 seconds before collapsing. The second ship died trying to rescue the first. It flew into a minefield that had been invisible until it detonated. The third ship was rammed by what appeared to be a small cargo vessel. The vessel had no crew. It had been automated, programmed to wait for exactly this moment. And then the human fleet struck. They came from everywhere, from behind asteroids, from inside dust clouds, from the shadows of moons. Small packs of ships, 5 or 6 at a time, attacking isolated vessels and then disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. They tried to regroup, but the humans would not let them. Every time a formation began to assemble, human ships would appear, break it apart, and fade away. They fought like their ancient ancestors had hunted, with patience and coordination and relentless, grinding pressure. And they fought in ways that made no sense. Conquered monitoring stations had positioned ships at the edge of the Sol system to observe the battle. What they saw: explanation. Human pilots performing maneuvers that should have killed them. Human ships taking damage that should have been fatal and continuing to fight. Human Marines boarding vessels in hard vacuum, fighting hand-to-hand against species twice their size. One image would become famous across the galaxy. A human soldier, caught on video during a boarding action, took a direct hit from a plasma rifle. The shot burned through his armor and into his chest. He should have died instantly. Instead, he remained standing. For 11 seconds, he continued to fire his weapon, killing 3 more soldiers before finally collapsing. The medical report would later confirm that he had been technically dead for the last 4 of those seconds. His body had simply refused to stop fighting. The conquered observers transmitted everything they saw. Live feeds spread across the galaxy. Billions of beings watched as humanity revealed what it really was. Not primitives, not prey, not a species to be ignored or dismissed. Predators, warriors, survivors of a world that had tried to kill them for 4 billion years. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it was over, 112 ships had been destroyed. Another 43 were too damaged to fight. The remaining vessels, barely 45, fled the system in disarray. Fleet Commander was among the dead. His flagship had been swarmed by 6 human destroyers that had refused to stop fighting even as they burned. The last image from his bridge showed human Marines cutting through the hull, their faces hidden behind battle armor, their movements precise and unstoppable. Humanity had lost ships too, nearly 200, but they had won. Against the largest fleet that had ever assembled, they had won. And the galaxy had watched. The conquered High Council had not met in emergency session for 300 years. The last time had been the plague, which had killed 2 billion beings before being contained. Before that, the silence of when an entire species had vanished overnight. Now they met again. 12 representatives of the founding races, plus observers from hundreds of member species, gathered in the Great Chamber on the conquered capital world. The topic was humanity. "We have all seen the footage," said Speaker Cal, an elder who had guided the conquered through countless crises. "We have all read the reports. What we witnessed in the Sol system was unprecedented." "It was impossible," someone muttered from the observer galleries. "And yet it happened. The question before us is simple: what do we do now?" Arguments erupted immediately. Some demanded that humanity be classified as a threat and contained. Others argued for immediate diplomatic engagement. Still others suggested that the conquered do nothing, that the humans had dealt with their own problem and should be left alone. The debate raged for hours. No consensus emerged. And then a voice spoke from the back of the chamber. "If I may, Speaker." Cal looked up. A small figure was approaching the central platform, old and hunched, wearing the simple uniform of a low-ranking administrator. "You are Speaker, Junior Analyst, Cargo Documentation Division." A murmur went through the chamber, a junior analyst, at a high council meeting. I was not aware the documentation division had been invited to participate. "They weren't, Speaker. I came on my own. I have information the council needs to hear." Cal's first instinct was to have the intruder removed, but something in the old's eyes stopped him, something like quiet certainty. "Very well, you have 5 minutes." Climbed the steps to the speaker's platform. He was trembling slightly. He had waited his entire career for this moment. He had sacrificed everything for this moment. He would not waste it. 45 years ago, a human vessel accidentally entered conquered space. It was processed, classified, and filed away. Species 4417C, pre-industrial type 4. No one looked closer because no one needed to. They came from a backwater. They were primitive. They didn't matter. He tapped a control, and data began appearing on the chamber's displays. I looked closer, and I found something we all should have seen from the beginning. The numbers scrolled past: reaction times, visual processing speeds, bone density, muscle mass, environmental tolerance, every metric humanity had provided compared against the galactic baseline. We assumed they were primitive because they came from an unimportant place. We never asked a different question. We never asked, what kind of place produces a species like this? More data appeared: Earth's geological history, the mass extinctions, the ice ages, the volcanic events, the asteroid impacts. Earth is not a cradle, council members. It is a crucible, a world so hostile that life should never have evolved there at all. And yet it did. And the species that survived, that clawed its way to the top of that world's food chain, is sitting out there right now, wondering why we treated them like they were nothing. Silence in the chamber, complete absolute silence. We have been watching a predator and calling it prey. We have been dismissing warriors as primitives. We have been ignoring a species forged in the fires of a death world, and that species just destroyed the largest military fleet they have ever assembled. Turned to face the council directly. "I have been trying to tell you this for decades. I was demoted for it, transferred, silenced. But I never stopped gathering data. I never stopped trying to understand what humanity really is. And now I am asking you, all of you, to finally listen." He took a deep breath. The humans are not a threat that needs to be contained. They are not a problem that needs to be solved. They are a species that has earned everything they have through blood and suffering and sheer determination. And they have been waiting, patiently, for the galaxy to notice them. He stepped back from the platform. The galaxy has noticed. The question is, what will we do now? The chamber erupted. 1,000 voices, 100 species, all trying to speak at once. But beneath the chaos, something was shifting, something fundamental. The conquered had ignored humanity for 45 years. They had dismissed the warnings. They had buried the reports. They had looked at the evidence and chosen to see nothing. They could not do that anymore. On Threshold Station, Ambassador David received word of the council meeting. He listened to the report in silence, his face unreadable. "They're finally talking about us," his aide said. "Some of them are scared, some want to make us enemies, but they're talking." David nodded slowly. "What about the analyst?" "He's being held for questioning, unauthorized entry to a restricted session, but the speaker has asked him to remain available. They want to hear more." "I bet they do." David walked to his window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, a lonely bureaucrat who had spent his life fighting for the truth was finally being heard. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was waking up to what humanity really was. "Send a message to the council," David said. "Tell them that humanity is prepared to discuss our relationship with the conquered. Tell them we are open to dialogue, cooperation, and mutual respect." He paused. "And tell them that if they want to meet us as equals, they should be prepared to treat us as equals. We have waited 45 years for that courtesy. We will not wait forever." The aide nodded and left to send the message. David remained at the window, watching the stars. The game was not over. The galaxy had noticed humanity, but notice was not the same as acceptance, not the same as respect. But it was a start. And humanity had learned long ago that starts were all they needed. Give them a foothold, and they would build a fortress. Give them a chance, and they would take the galaxy. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready to give them that chance. David smiled. Ready or not, it was coming. 50 years had passed since humanity stumbled through a wormhole and discovered they were not alone in the universe. 50 years of building, 50 years of fighting, 50 years of proving that they were more than the galaxy had ever imagined. Now the galaxy was ready to admit it. The Concord Grand Assembly Hall was the largest structure in known space. It floated in the void at the heart of conquered territory, a sphere of crystal and metal that could hold representatives from every member species. For 12,000 years, it had been the center of galactic civilization. Today it was full. 3,000 species had sent delegates. Trillions of beings watched via transmission feeds that spanned the galaxy. News programs on 10,000 worlds had cleared their schedules. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. They wanted to see the humans. Ambassador David was 83 years old. His hair was white. His hands trembled slightly when he walked, but his eyes were clear and his voice was steady as he approached the central platform where the founding races sat in judgment. Behind him walked a delegation of 50 humans, carefully chosen to represent their species. Scientists and soldiers, artists and engineers, young and old, every one of them had fought in their own way for this moment. And behind them, in a place of honor reserved for those who had earned special recognition, walked. The old was frail now. His eyes were dim. He walked with the help of a mechanical support frame, but he had insisted on being here. He had spent 60 years fighting for this moment. He would not miss it for anything. Speaker Cal rose from his seat as the human delegation reached the platform. "Ambassador, on behalf of the Galactic Concord, I welcome you." "Thank you, Speaker. On behalf of humanity, I am honored to be here." The formal greeting complete, Cal gestured for silence. The vast chamber fell quiet. "We are gathered today to address a matter of unprecedented significance. 50 years ago, the species known as humanity made first contact with the Concord. They were classified as pre-industrial Type 4 and assigned to the standard processing queue. This classification was a mistake." A murmur rippled through the assembly. For the speaker to admit a mistake publicly was unusual. For that mistake to involve a species classification was unheard of. In the years since first contact, humanity has demonstrated capabilities that our classification system failed to anticipate. They have developed technology that our own scientists believed impossible. They have defeated military forces that should have overwhelmed them. They have shown resilience, adaptability, and determination that exceed any species in the Concord database. Cal paused, letting the words sink in. "We have reviewed the evidence. We have consulted our experts. We have debated this matter for 5 years, longer than any species evaluation in Concord history, and we have reached a conclusion." He turned to face David directly. "Humanity is hereby granted full membership in the Galactic Concord, effective immediately. Furthermore, in recognition of your species' extraordinary capabilities and achievements, you are being granted Tier 1 status, the highest classification available under Concord law." The chamber erupted. Tier 1 status, the classification reserved for the 12 founding races, the classification that had not been granted to any new species in 10,000 years. The humans, the species that had been dismissed as primitive, had just been elevated to the highest rank the galaxy could offer. David remained still, his face showing no surprise. He had known this was coming. The negotiations had been long and difficult, but in the end, the conquered had no choice. The evidence was too clear. The galaxy had watched humanity fight, and the galaxy could not pretend they had seen anything other than what they were. A superpower, overlooked, underestimated, and now impossible to ignore. When the noise finally died down, David stepped forward to address the assembly. 50 years ago, he began, a human ship stumbled through a wormhole and found itself in the heart of your civilization. Our captain expected many things from that moment: wonder, fear, perhaps death. What she did not expect was paperwork. A few laughs scattered through the chamber. David allowed himself a small smile. You handed us a form and a waiting time of nearly 1,000 years. You classified us as primitive and filed us away. You looked at everything we were, everything we had accomplished, and you saw nothing worth noticing. His smile faded. We could have been angry about that. We could have demanded recognition. We could have made threats or thrown tantrums or tried to force you to see us. But that is not who we are. Where we come from, the loudest animals in the jungle are not the most dangerous. We learned a long time ago that you do not announce yourself to the world. You simply make sure that when the world finally notices, it is already too late to stop you. He gestured to the humans behind him. We spent 50 years building, 50 years growing, 50 years becoming something that could not be ignored. We did not do it for your approval. We did not do it for this ceremony. We did it because that is what humans do. We survive. We adapt. We overcome. It is in our blood. It is in our bones. It is the gift that Earth gave us, a world that tried to kill us for 4 billion years and only made us stronger. David turned to look at the founding races, meeting each of their eyes in turn. You have granted us Tier 1 status today. We thank you for that recognition, but we want you to understand something. We did not need your approval to become what we are. We did not need your permission to claim our place among the stars. We earned it. Every step of the way, through blood and fire and the stubborn refusal to give up, we earned it. He straightened his shoulders. We will be good partners to the conquered. We will honor our treaties. We will work together for the betterment of all species, but we will never again accept being treated as lesser. We will never again wait patiently while others decide our fate. We are humanity. We have stood against everything the universe could throw at us, and we are still standing. His voice rose, filling the vast chamber. The galaxy did not notice us for 50 years. That was your choice, and we do not hold it against you. But the galaxy is watching now, and we intend to give you something worth watching. He stepped back from the platform. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, applause began to build. It started with the smaller species, the ones who had also been overlooked, the ones who understood what it meant to fight for recognition. It spread through the assembly until even the founding races were joining in. David bowed his head slightly, accepting the acknowledgement, but his eyes were distant. He was thinking about everyone who had not lived to see this moment. The soldiers who had died at New Helsinki, the crews who had sacrificed themselves in the Sol system, the generations who had worked and built and dreamed of a day when humanity would take its rightful place. This was for them. In the weeks that followed, Threshold Station became the busiest place in human space. Delegations from across the galaxy arrived daily, seeking trade agreements, military alliances, cultural exchanges. Species that had ignored humanity for decades now competed for their attention. Admiral, now 93 years old, addressed the conquered fleet commanders at a formal dinner. 50 years ago you handed us a form and told us to wait, she said, her voice still strong despite her years. We didn't complain. We built. We explored. We defended ourselves. We did not need your acknowledgement to become what we are." She raised her glass. "To the future, may it be built by those who earn their place in it." The toast was met with respectful silence. The alien admirals looked at the old woman and saw something they rarely encountered: a warrior who had lived long enough to see victory, a leader who had never stopped fighting. They would not underestimate her species again. On the other side of the station, a different kind of meeting was taking place. David sat in his private office, sharing a drink with. They had been offered a formal position in humanity's diplomatic corps, and he had accepted. It was, he said, the only place in the galaxy where his work had ever been appreciated. 60 years, said, swirling his drink. I spent 60 years trying to make them listen. They demoted me, transferred me, ignored me, but I never stopped. Why? David asked. You had no connection to us. We were just another file on your desk. Why did you fight so hard? Was quiet for a moment. Because it was the truth, he said finally. And the truth matters, even when no one wants to hear it, even when it costs you everything. The truth matters. David nodded slowly. He understood. Humanity had spent 50 years fighting for the same thing: the truth about who they were, the truth about what they could become, the truth that had finally, after all this time, been acknowledged. What happens now? Asked. You have everything you wanted: membership, recognition, power. What will humanity do with it? David looked out the window at the stars. It was a question he had asked himself many times. What did humanity want? What were they fighting for? The answer was simpler than people might think. We'll keep building, he said. Keep growing, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. That's what we've always done. It's what we'll always do. He turned back to, but we'll also try to be better, better partners, better allies, better neighbors. The galaxy ignored us for 50 years, and it would be easy to hold a grudge. It would be easy to become what they feared we might be. But that's not who we want to be. We want to be a force for good. We want to prove that power doesn't have to mean cruelty, that strength doesn't have to mean domination. He smiled slightly. We come from a hard world. We learned to fight before we learned to talk, but we also learned something else. We learned that survival means more than just winning battles. It means building communities. It means protecting the weak. It means standing up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. David finished his drink. The thought we were prey because we didn't attack first, because we didn't threaten, because we waited and built instead of striking out in anger. They were wrong. Patience isn't weakness. Restraint isn't cowardice. We could have been conquerors. We chose to be something else. What? Guardians, protectors. The quiet ones who watch from the edges and step in when they're needed. The galaxy didn't notice us for 50 years. Fine. But now that they've noticed, they'll find that we're not a threat to be feared. We're allies to be trusted. We're partners to be valued. We're the species that fought its way out of a death world and decided to help others instead of dominating them. He looked at with something like affection. You saw that, didn't you? Back when you first looked at our file, you saw what we could be. Nodded slowly. I saw potential. I saw a species that had overcome impossible odds and come out stronger. I saw warriors who chose to be peaceful. I saw strength combined with restraint. He paused. I saw hope. Then help us live up to it. Help us become what you saw. Raised his glass. To humanity. To the species that came from nowhere and became everything. David raised his own glass. To the truth, and to those who fight for it. They drank together, two unlikely allies, watching the stars turn slowly outside the window. The Dominion requested peace negotiations 1 month later. The terms were simple: release all conquered species, surrender all conquered territory, submit to demilitarization and conquered oversight. They had no choice but to accept. Their military was broken, their economy was collapsing, and they had learned the hard way that some prey was not worth hunting. Fleet Commander had been wrong about many things, but his final words had been proven right. The humans were wolves, and wolves did not forget those who had tried to destroy them. But neither did they seek revenge. The peace terms were harsh but fair. They were humiliated but not destroyed. Humanity had the power to wipe them out, and everyone knew it. Instead, they offered mercy. It was, perhaps, the most frightening thing about them. On the first anniversary of humanity's Tier 1 classification, Admiral gave her final public address. She was 94 years old, and her doctors had told her she did not have long left. She spoke from the observation deck of the Meridian Museum, the station built around her original ship, preserved as a monument to humanity's first contact. "I was 39 years old when I took this ship through that wormhole," she said. "I expected to die. I expected my crew to die. Instead, we found ourselves in the middle of a galaxy that didn't know we existed and didn't care to learn." She smiled at the memory. "They gave us a form, a waiting time of 1,000 years, and I remember thinking, these people have no idea who they're dealing with. They see a small ship from a primitive world and they think they know everything about us. They're wrong." She looked out at the crowd, humans and aliens alike, gathered to hear her words. "We were always more than they imagined. We were always stronger than they knew, and we proved it. Not by fighting, though we fought when we had to. Not by demanding recognition, though we certainly deserved it. We proved it by being patient, by building, by growing, by becoming something that could not be." She straightened her back, standing tall despite her age. "I won't live to see what humanity becomes in the centuries ahead, but I know it will be something magnificent, something that makes the galaxy wonder how they ever overlooked us, something that proves once and for all that the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones who wait in the shadows, are the ones you should have been watching all along." She raised her hand in a final salute. "To humanity, to the stars we have claimed and the stars we have yet to reach, to the fallen and the living and the yet to be born, we came from nothing, we were given nothing, and we became everything." The crowd rose to its feet. Human and alien voices joined together in a roar of approval that echoed through the station and out into the void. Admiral died 3 months later, peacefully in her sleep. Her body was given to the stars, scattered in the space between Earth and Threshold, where humanity's future had begun. But her words lived on. They were carved into monuments across human space. They were taught in schools on 100 worlds. They became the creed of a species that had learned to be patient, to be strong, and to never, ever give up. The galaxy had ignored them for 50 years. The galaxy would never ignore them again. Because the humans had proven something that the universe had forgotten. They had proven that greatness does not come from where you start. It comes from what you become. They had proven that the overlooked can become the unstoppable. They had proven that patience, combined with strength, combined with the will to survive, can change everything. They had come from nowhere. They had been given nothing. And they had inherited the stars. The wolves of Earth had finally come home. And home now was everywhere.